Hopefully everybody enjoys the presentation I have for you. Uh, First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Culture Alliance and the Heart of Georgian Bay for giving me this opportunity to present tonight, and all the good work that they've been doing here within the North Simcoe County within the last year and a half. Just going to start off getting my presentation ready. Oh. Just bear with me one moment. Of course, there's going to be a technical glitch. Okay, I'm ready to get started. So like I said earlier, welcome to Anishinaabek Doodemag. Today we're going to be exploring some of the different clans in Southern Georgian Bay and Simcoe area, Lake Simcoe area, and over to Saugeen. Just before we get started, I just want to give a little presentation etiquette regarding your microphone. Your microphone will be muted automatically. It will be open during the Q&A session. During the Q&A session, please raise your emoji hand and the host will enable your microphone so you can ask that question. Questions can be asked in the chat room during the presentation, but please keep background noise to a minimum once your microphone is enabled when you are asking a question. And please be respectful during the Q&A as well as in the chat room, as I know we all are. So a little bit about myself. My name is Clayton Samuel King, otherwise known as Wapshka Makons. Ani Bojo, Wapshka Makons Indigenous, Megazedodem, Name Menis and Donjaba, Ogamawaj Gijan Kazo, Mishomis, Mishipsu Kwe Gijan Kazo Nokmis. My name is Clayton King. I reside here in Barrie, Ontario, central Ontario, just north of Toronto, about an hour south of Name-Menis or Georgian Bosley First Nation. I am a member of Bosley First Nation. My parents are Richard King and Gail Stupp. My biological mother was Nanette Marie Banks King. She was from Fond du Lac First Nation. She passed away back in 1998. At that time period, I kind of went on a little wandering and came back to the area in about 2006 where I pursued my art career. And since then, my art has corresponded with the Anishinaabe culture and learning a little bit more about who I am and how I fit in this crazy world we live in today. I'm not going to go through all the biography. It'll be there for the recording. So for those non-Indigenous participants tonight, I'm just going to give you a little Nishnabek 101. Who are the Nishnabek? Well, the Nishnabek is comprised of the Three Fires Confederacy, made up of what is known as the Ojibwe, the Dawa, and the Potawatomi. The Ojibwe are the keepers of the faith. The Dawa are the keepers of the trade, and the Potawatomi are the keepers of the fire. This map here kind of shows a little distribution about 1768 of the different Anishinaabe tribes that encompassed around Georgian or around the Great Lakes. It is said through our prophecy stories that we had come from the east and had migrated towards this area and beyond into the plains of Canada. Within this list, we have, this is right after the Royal Proclamation of 1764, and when the British had defeated the French throughout the Beaver Wars. We have the Ojibwe, Dawa, Potawatomi, Wasaga, Nipissing, and Mi'kmaq, Algonquin, Shawnee, Lenape, or Delaware, Miami, Biankashaw, Kickapoo, Illinois, Iowa, Sauk, Fox, Meskwaki, or Winnebago, Ho Chunk, and Menominee. So in Ontario, we have 39 First Nations that make up the Nishnabek Nation. They're separated through different regions: the North Superior region, Lake Huron region, Southeast region, and Southwest region. We have one Grand Council chief, Chigama Glen Hare, and each of these regions is made up of different deputy grand chiefs, Gima Edward YY and Gima Scott McLeod, Gima James Jim Bob Marsden, and Gima Joe Muskokamon. More information for those seeking it can be found in the Nishnabek website and other sources. They've got a lot of different information describing who they are and what they do for our First Nations people here in Ontario, part of the Nishnabek Nation, otherwise known as the Union of Ontario Indians. So, moving into the presentation, what are clans? What are Anishinaabe, Doodemag? What I would think is different stories get passed through different First Nations and different territories in terms of origin, in terms of how things are laid out, in terms of governance structure and so forth. And things have changed drastically throughout the years through colonization of Canada and the earlier British, and trying to move forward with them side by side. As I said, through the clan system, that our Dotem passes through our father's line with the Nishnabek. With the Haudenosaunee peoples to the south, they pass their clan on through their mother's side. Nowadays, if you don't have a clan, sometimes you can be adopted into a clan. You can pass that same on. You can reach out to those elders. In the past too, as well, as we'll talk about further, I'll show some different images in terms of how those ones had been adopted into different clans, and as well as sometimes carried their mother's clan too as well. Then not only can you get adopted into clans, but you can ask spirit, you can pass that same on, you can obtain it through different ceremonies, through shaking tent ceremony, through others in terms of councils and in terms of those elders gatherings and so forth. The image here on the right shows a Tikanagan and a genome. Back in 2017, 18-ish, I had attended a presentation by Onabanase, or Jim Dumont in Rama, and he gave the clan teachings at that presentation. And one of those teachings that he talked about was how the Tikanagan was laced, and how it kind of represented that the way the genome spirals through and interlocks, and how at the top of that Tikanagan in older times, there used to be the different clan symbols of the mother and father on there. And what he talked about was how they interwoven into each other over time, as we're not just made up of one clan, but we're made up of many through the generations since time immemorial, from our mother's father and our mother's mother and our father's mother and our father's father and so forth, going through all those lines. So I just wanted to share that at the beginning because I thought that was a really interesting way to look at things, because nowadays we have a lot of people who identify with their clans and are very proud of their clans, but we often forget about those ones that were before us, especially the women. At the beginning, when I introduced myself, part of my introduction was I introduced my grandfather, Nicholas Ogamoajuan Kingba, and as well as Edna Mishipsu Kwe King Ni Tababadong Ba. And I do that because I honor those teachings and all those things that they taught me when I was younger, and how it's reflected into me becoming a man. And I love them and I miss them too. So since I started this research, like I said at the beginning, it started off with my artwork. I started getting back into drawing, painting, sculpting, and as well as a lot of reading, trying to discuss history matters within my family dynamic with my aunties and uncles, as well as local elders, other clan aunties and uncles, and trying to understand a little bit more regarding our spiritual ways, as well as that discussion and understanding. I often would read a lot. I've got a lot of different documentary sources that I've looked upon, and in the past, when presenting to different elders and different meetings, I would discuss these things that I find with them and how it's reflected today, how it was reflected when they were growing up, and how it can kind of push forward in terms of how we are as Anishinaabe, and how it'll benefit us in the future, and understanding and knowing a little bit more. Not everybody grew up with a culture. I myself, I grew up in St. Catharines, Ontario. I was taken by FACS, or Family and Children's Services, at a very young age. I think I was about 3 years old, and I was put in a foster home for a little bit, and then I was adopted by my father's aunt, or my father's sister, Gail, my aunt, but I call her my mother because she raised me. And she had already had 6 kids of her own, and she took on me and my younger brother, Greg. And not only that, we lived right close to my grandmother and my grandfather, where I spent a lot of time with them as a young child too, as well, sleeping over, terrorizing my uncles Nick and Dave when they had to go to work, and helping out with the family garden and so forth, and just being a kid and having fun. When I started looking at different clan origins, I wanted to paint them. I wanted to try to understand a little bit more about them. So, and some of the resources that I found were these lists here from William Whippoorwill Warren and his book History of the Ojibways, based upon traditions and oral statements, as well as the History of the Ojibwe Indians by Peter Jones, the Reverend Peter Jones. And this book here, the Ojibwe Indians of Perry Island, Their Social and Religious Life, by Diamond Jeunesse in 1935. So these lists I looked at, and I thought, man, I'm trying to understand them, not only figure out, some of the meanings behind these clans and what they do and how they're structured and so forth, but the language came with it, and trying to understand the language a little bit more. Oftentimes when things are recorded on historical publications, the writing's a little bit different from time period to time period. The writing's different with the dialect from First Nation to First Nation. So I kind of take it as it is and try to learn a little bit more. So over here on the left-hand side, we have crane, we have catfish, loon, bear, marten, reindeer, wolf, merman and mermaid, pike, lynx, eagle, rattlesnake, moose, black duck, cormorant, goose, sucker, sturgeon, whitefish, beaver, gull, and hawk. And those are the list from Whippoorwill Warren. In the middle here, we have a list from Peter Jones in terms of the Mississaugas and the territory of the Williams Treaty, Mud Lake, or Curve Lake now, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog, and even right into the CTC territories as well. And then the bottom one it comes from the Ojibwe Indians of Perry Island. Now this book I've read, and I had first seen online, and I'm like, wow, I need to get that book. And finally I was able to purchase one online, and it is just full with a lot of stories from the King family, the Pegamagabos, Shugdups, and many more. And they talk a lot about traditional stories, Medewan rites, as well as different little taboos. And I thought it was pretty neat because in there it gives a little bit more history in terms of my family, the King family, or descendants of Ogamosh. A couple others here. We have Basil Johnson's list, and as well as Badwewadum Ba, or Eddie Benton Benet from the Mishomis book. And the reason why I wanted to show these is like I said earlier, the difference between the categorization, so to speak. Some of those different teachings of the Crane being of a chieftainship clan, and being those echo makers, as well as the loon and the turtle clan, head of the or the Musquatus, head of the fish clan, is those actuals and intermediaries. And then we have the bear and marten and deer. And then over here on Basil Johnson's side or list, he's got different subjugations in terms of leadership, defense, sustenance, learning, medicine, and subs for all those in terms of the warriors, the hunters, the teachers, and the healers. That's one thing I had often thought, is that, I mean, we have these identifications and we have pride in our clans, but sometimes it gets a little sticky where people feel like they're obligated to have to be a leader or have to be a medicine person or so forth. And in some ways that's good. I mean, they follow that road and they move forward. Some just live and let bygones be bygones, so to speak. Another list I found was a place of refuge for all time. This is a story of the migration of American Potawatomi into Upper Canada. My descendant Ogamosh was one of the Potawatomis that had come from the eastern side of Michigan, from a place called Shalbay-Wawaganing, or now known as Sheboygan. There was many different waves of Potawatomi, Chippewa, and Odawa people that had come into the area after Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act in 1830, and as well as the 1835 Treaty of Chicago and so forth. But here in his book, he lists different clans in terms of if they're in Canada or if they're not. A lot of this research I found through the Potawatomi documentation always kind of refers back to those earlier treaties in America and trying to move forward with that representation in terms of what they had given up. So here we have different, he kind of lays them out in terms of water fantry, bird fantry, man fantry, wolf fantry, buffalo fantry, all these different kind of things, even man fantry. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't really understand too much what that means, but I see, I mean, he kind of titles them under their specific species. Last year, I had the opportunity to head up to the Ojibwe Cultural Foundation and see their site and see how it could, how they started, and wanted to take a tour. I had never been up there, Gene, and it was my first time. And while I was there, I had seen this exhibit on display. And here, through the work of different researchers up there, like Alan Corbier, Heidi Bohaker, and I forget who else, but they had kind of labeled the different clans through the different families that were documented back in treaty making time in the early 1800 or 1900s. And I thought it was cool. I said, wow, I said it'd be nice to see something documented within the Southern First Nations, as well as the Williams Treaty First Nations, and going down to the Southwest too as well, and into San and so forth. So this presentation will kind of complement what the great work they have done up there. Within this list, we have moose, great heron, rough grouse, killdeer plover, turkey, pike, black water snake, channel catfish, and a brown bullhead, which is another species of catfish, neme or sturgeon, muskie, sucker, crayfish, lion, marten, otter, beaver, fox, skunk, squirrel, and bear. For those that haven't seen Alan Corbier's discussion on clans in his presentation with the Ojibwe Cultural Foundation, is online. During that presentation, he talked about that lion and how it wasn't like the Mishibzu, but like the African lion, and how that clan came from the English side of things, when an Anishinaabe woman had married an Englishman, so to speak, that sometimes they had went by the lion because the English had that represented on the medals that they presented, and as well as in a lot of their different emblems and so forth. And we're going to touch base on that here in a couple slides. So within that presentation, I've taken a snapshot in terms of the list that he had created, which kind of, goes back to the previous list from the Ojibwe Cultural Foundation. Some other notables in here were the crotch of a tree, as well as the oak tree, birch bark tree. So they weren't always animals, right? As well as the whirlwind, say. And I had seen you talked about another goose. I was trying to figure out what he meant by that, but I couldn't find anything. I had seen different goose totems, certainly the Canada goose ones, but he might have been talking about the white one. So within all these lists, I had put together my own type of list in terms of what I had seen previously, what I've talked to with different elders from my community. And I remember doing this probably about 10 years ago and hadn't really looked upon it since that time period. Kind of just sat in back files of my computer, and then took the present list that I had just shown and kind of classified them just by who they are. So the first slide, we have the flyers, Nimki Benesi, or Thunderbird, say, the tornado or the whirlwind, Jijak, crane, shaggy, great blue heron, mong, or the loon, migaze, bald eagle, begek, or kekek, a hawk, tipi giozans, or sparrow hawk, gogoko, owl, cock, the goose, or some others say wewe, and the black duck or cormorant, ejbege, wisne, the mud hen or American coot. I haven't found a translation for that one. We had also in those lists the raven and crow, hondek, so they might be closely related. The seagull, turkey, mizise, rough grouse, benet, kingfisher, kishkamonsi, the killdeer or plover, and also the crescent moon clan was in that list from Clifton's work too as well, and also the rooster, abise. And this one Alan talks about in his research that this one was when sometimes when a Anishinaabe would marry Anishinaabe Kwe would marry a Frenchman, that they would take on that clan, and he goes on how that represents the Gauls and how that was a symbol upon a lot of the different cargo and supplies that would come over from France to North America, stamped on the boxes, so to speak. We move from there to the four-legged. So I kind of divvied up the four-legged because there's a lot in terms of what we know as the hoof clan, big paws and little paws. I kind of separated it. I remember hearing that from the clan gathering that was held at Springwater Park a couple years ago. So under the hoof we have buffalo, and then we have moose, elk, reindeer / caribou, whitetail deer, big paw with a bear, lynx, wolf, coyote. And then we have, I had seen a wildcat, or I just slashed it as bobcat, fox, wagosh, lion, and then the little paws, pine marten, objishi, fisher, jeek, mink, shongwesh, raccoon, hesbun, skunk, shgok, and porcupine, gok, or gog. And then the little paws, woodchuck, cockcheesh, rabbit, wabos, squirrel, jidmo, and the web paws would be mick or the beaver, nigik, otter, and ojoshk, muskrat. So within all these lists, I know that some of them could probably be categorized together, perhaps. But then again, I mean, it could be separate as well. For the swimmers, we have the snapping turtle, Mshika. Muscatus is the painted turtle. Nibanabe is the merman. And Nibanique, mermaid. I don't know if that's correct. I just kind of made up my own word there. I'm not going to lie. Name, sturgeon, pike, ginoge, muskanoji, muskalung or muskie, monomek, catfish, ausine, aracine, brown bullhead, tikmek, whitefish, namaben, sucker, papagase, carp. I think I said that right. I know when I was working with our elders last year, we're trying to figure out a translation for carp, and always came back to the Maven sucker. But I did see this word in one of my Ojibwe language dictionaries. I forget which one. And then we have crayfish. For the crawlers, I had put under the rattlesnake, Chishikwe, and black water snake, Zundamo, and Maki, or frog, as well as the tree species, wigwas, or birch bark, tigamish, or white oak, and the crotch of the tree, Niswanquit. So within all that list, I think I had a number of about 64 clans, somewhere around there. I know in some different teachings, there's 44 clans, some 48, some 50. Like I said earlier, it varies to vary. And even within that list, some could be put together too as well, like the raven crow, perhaps, maybe the turtles, and it could lower that list down. So here we are on the shores of Georgian Bay, beautiful Southern Georgian Bay. All of Georgian Bay is beautiful, and all the Great Lakes where Nishnabek reside. So what we're going to be talking about in the presentation is some of the different areas in and around Southern Georgian Bay. My main focus will be on Chimnasing. I will carry on within those ones in the San territory, as well as a couple of those ones up in Robinson Huron territory in terms of Shawniga, Wasaksing, Matabik, or Moose Deer Point. Talk about some older villages and places where people resided, Washwanong, as well as Bomgonde or Bomgonda, Bosley Island, Openaconning, Potato Island, and we have another Chimnasing, Lajoniang, which is Georgina Island, and earlier before that, Snake Island, Fox Island, Shingaming or Cape Croker, and Namewi Quedong, and those ones at Colpoys Bay for a time period, Zagin, and Nawash as well. So on the side there, I've got some of the different meanings that I was able to find throughout the years in terms of the interpretations of these places. There's many different other places in between the southern shoreline all the way up to Manitoulin. Not only villages, but fishing camps and hunting camps, sugar camps, harvesting camps, and so forth that have happened throughout time immemorial. So like I said earlier, the presentation was provided by the Cultural Alliance in the heart of Georgian Bay. When I was younger, I first moved up to Chimnasing probably about 1996 in the fall time there. And throughout my time since then, a lot of the understanding within North Simcoe has always been based on the Hurons. A lot of archaeological work and historical work has been done in the past, but very little has been shared about the Nishnabek in the area, from Njikaning to Coolwater to all over, just like I described in the previous slide. During the wars with the Haudenosaunee, as we know, as history tells us, and our oral stories tell us that when they had come up and wanted to take over take over the whole area. And for a time period, they did. They had many battles throughout not only North Simcoe and Central Ontario, but all over the Great Lakes. And it lasted from around 1641 to 1701. And, I mean, a lot of people always say, oh, this is, I mean, this is the area where the Huron flourished, and which they did. But also they had their neighbors to the north and not too far away, and just over the river, were the Anishinaabe, as well as, I mean, in that area of the land in between. And as well as to the south of us, and in the peninsula of Saugeen, and the Dawas there, the Mi'kmaq to the north, other Algonquins in central, and other ancestors from Rama and Chimnasing and central part of the area. A lot of some archaeology reports in the past have placed Nishnabek artifacts and so forth within this area that predate the Huron. So that's a little bit more academic. I don't really want to go there right now, but it just shows how long our occupations, our oral history tells us. I mean, like I said earlier, we had come from the east, and we had migrated and utilized those different stopping points through that prophecy throughout the Great Lakes. So here's just another map. These two maps come from Helen Hornbeck Tanner's Atlas of the Great Lakes, or Indian Villages, or Atlas of Indigenous Peoples in the Great Lakes. It just goes to show how many different battles within the territory at this time period that have been documented. And there are some within her mapping that haven't been documented, but have been documented over time within not only our own people, but having no stories published in the past through the Ontario Historical Society over 100 years ago. So after this, we have the Great Peace Treaty of Montreal, and between many different nations, many different Western nations, many different Haudenosaunee nations that had come up and wanted to kind of do away with the killing. This one here is said to be the first document written on paper, I guess you would say, with different clan signatures. In the past, I mean, our people had utilized many different sites to mark many specific totems and other spiritual beings, whether it was pictographs on rock or petroglyphs carved out of limestone, or as well as on birch bark through the scrolls of our people that have been kept secret and safe for a long time. So within that, we had other treaties within the Haudenosaunee Nation. I'm not going to get into this too much, but I would recommend, I mean, Brian Charles, my friend Brian Charles, is a very knowledgeable man on many different wampum, as well as Dr. Corbier too as well. But here are three different specific nation treaties that were made between Haudenosaunee and Nishnabek, particularly the Dish with One Spoon wampum, the 5 Council Fires wampum, and Ojibwe Friendship Belt. The 5 Council Fires wampum, I just kind of gave that title. Sometimes it's been known as Yellowhead's Belt too as well, but I just wanted to just give it another name, I guess. So within that belt, I mean, I talked about that good white road between relations of the Anishinabek and Haudenosaunee, and we talk about those different villages and those different council fires from Boatsing all the way down to Minising, or well, that would be the Toronto Islands, or Minisay, the River Credit. And at each one of these places, I mean, they recognized the different clans that were at these places. A lot of this description comes from the recordings of Peter Jones, the Reverend Peter Jones, and as well as from different meetings between Haudenosaunee and the Nishnabek, particularly one in 1840, where John Buck had described the belt, as well as Chief Yellowhead. But what I wanted to just show is those different council fires between those places and those Doodemag that were present there. So we had the crane at Boating, Sault Ste. Marie, and we had that beautiful white fish representing a clean white heart at Meneg. And we had that beaver at Bosley Island, or Bomgonde, that represents wisdom, and that goes within our seven grandfather teachings as well. And the sun, which signified the illumination of ourselves to brighten our way, and that its rays should warm and regulate peace. The fourth council fire would be at Minjikaning, and this is where the talk was held with those ones that were entrusted with the belts, and the emblem of the white reindeer, Wabadik, was there. And it also talked about the District 1 spoon wampum at this time period too, during that meeting, and the abundance of game and food and sharing between nations. And then the fifth council fire at the River Credit, where the white-headed eagle signified strength, swiftness, and a keen eyesight. And he was kind of the messenger. If the Haudenosaunee were in trouble, they would go to those people living at the Credit, and they would carry those messengers would carry those to those different council fires. Not only these council fires, but other council fires all over in Anishinaabeg, or this great land. It was at the time of the Beaver Wars, about 1860, that Alexander Henry, a fur trader, merchant, and militia officer, had traveled up to Michilimackinac. And while he was up there, he had disguised himself as a French trader, and he ended up getting found out. But he was kind of adopted by Wawatam, a chief, and Ojibwe chief up there in the Sioux. And sure enough, he carried on and tried to do what he could as a trader. I do believe he was one of the founders of the Northwest Company too, as well, at this time. And it was in 1763 that Majikwis and Minawayana had taken over the British garrison at Michilimackinac, and Henry hid from them, but he was soon captured. And then Chief Wawatam had rescued him and had taken him in as a brother. And Henry had lived with them for over a year. And then they found out and got word about Sir William Johnson's peace conference at Fort Niagara. And then they started to travel down to Niagara for this conference. So within his writings in Travels and Adventures in Canada and Indian Territories, he just describes that traveling in detail. He talks about Skull Island. He talks about those Anishinaabe smoking a poagin with a rattlesnake, and many other different things. But one I seen that pointed that I thought was pretty good was a description of the Nishnabek within the territory here. So he stated, the next day was calm. We arrived at the entrance of navigation, which leads to Lac au Clay, or Lac le Clee. We presently passed two short carrying places at each of which were several lodges of Indians containing only women and children, the men being gone to the council at Niagara. So they continued on traveling down to Niagara, and when he got down to Niagara, he had stated, besides the 16 saltieres or Chippewa of the Sault Ste. Marie, with whom I had come to Fort Niagara, there were already at that place 80 Matchadash Indians, the same whose lodges we passed at the carrying place of Lac au Clay. These 96 men, being formed into what was called the Indian Battalion, were furnished with necessaries, and I was appointed to be their leader, me, whose best hope it had very lately been to live through their forbearance. So Alexander Henry was traveling, he was getting ready to travel from Niagara, Fort Niagara, to another another fort at Niagara Falls. I forget the name now. But when he did, the Chippewas of Nishnabek of Matchadash had stated that we're gonna go tomorrow. We'll see you there. So as he went, he was getting ready to. Well, he got orders to head down to Lake Erie and then to head to Detroit to work with others to make another peace agreement over there. And this was prior to the Belt here, 1764, that covenant chain. And so as he carried on, he got there and he waited for him and they didn't show up. So he ended up going back to Fort Niagara and had wondered where they went, and he was told that they ended up going back home. So they ended up getting their necessaries and they said, we might as well just head back home. We don't want to. We had already made peace with their brethren in terms of Pontiac and so forth. So it seems like they didn't want to deal with the British's dirty hands in terms of what they were trying to do. Alexander Henry says it a little bit differently in his book, though. I don't want to repeat that here. So within the Nishnabek of Chimnasing, it has been stated that originally they lived in the area bordering on northern Lake Superior, and in 1683 banded together with their branches of the Ojibwe Nation and some tribes from the south to eject the Iroquois from Ontario, where the Iroquois had been masters after they had defeated the Hurons and other occupants in this area. So this came from the history of Christian Island and our people from 1967, put together by pupils of the school and Sister Earl Troutman from the RC school and Sister O'Connor. It's one of the known documented sources of some of the people from Chimnasing in terms of whereabouts they had lived. There's different family stories that have different areas in terms of where they had come, as well as the Mississaugas and so forth that had come from the North Shore of Lake Huron. So at that meeting in Montreal, we had Chief Maingan. He was one of the chiefs that has signed the treaty, and here we have an image from Gawa Rock, or otherwise known as Maingan's panel. And from the ideas at this time period, it said that he had created this rock and that he was he had seen the demise of some of those Haudenosaunee people, and he had documented. And apparently, through the story, as the story goes, is that they were overcome by bad weather, so to speak, and a lot of them had drowned in Lake Superior. I just wanted to put this up because it's one of the documented clans of the Mi'kmaq people, or sometimes often known as Ojibwe chief too as well. So within Southern Georgian Bay, we had one of those stories from Jonas King, one of the grandsons of Wolgamawatch. And he stated, Nanabush was hunting a giant beaver wabnik. He drove it from Lake Superior to Georgian Bay, where the beaver, thoroughly exhausted, crawled halfway out of the water and turned to stone. Nanabush, seeking its hiding place, smote the land with his club and shattered it into the maze of islands that exist today. You can still see the beaver 3 miles north of Perry Sound, its body on shore, its tail drooping down under the water. So inspired by this story, I had painted this picture over here to the right. I thought it was really neat. I really enjoyed that story because some of the other stories are Huron legends in terms of the territory of Southern Georgian Bay. And I thought this was a really neat Nishnabek Potawatomi story. So moving forward, also within that time period, within those wars, we had Chief White Cloud. And I had read a book by David Plain, A Brief History of the Saugeen Peninsula. And in that book, he had stated the Mississauga or Eagle Jeans, Ojibwe, located in central and southeastern Ontario, And it was most likely the Mi'kmaq or Beaver Jeans Ojibwe who moved into the territory south of Georgian Bay, probably under the leadership of White Cloud, one of the principal Ojibwe war chiefs during the Iroquois War. I had tried to find a little bit more about Chief White Cloud and in terms of after this time period, and it's kind of like backing up what Mr. Plain has said. I haven't found any documentation yet, but I'm sure once I learn French, I'll be able to find a little bit more out, because a lot of that time, those those stories were written by the French people, and that documentation prior to the Beaver Wars. But we talked about earlier about that third council fire at Mosley Island, and that beaver that represented it and that held that wisdom. So I wanted to show a picture of Matchadash Bay as well as Bomgonde, a place where our people and our ancestors have rested for a long time, and as well as many others. This place is known as an area of trade for thousands of years. Many different remnants from many different tribes all over the Great Lakes have been found here through different archaeological digs and so forth. And the park itself puts on these different displays. So for those that would like a chance to go visit and understand a little bit more and to be able to see those artifacts, I'm sure their information center and tour guides can show you the way. So moving forward with the Meek Dodem, we have an origin story from Ogama Leonard Menegba. He has stated within the story, he talked about after the Huron had left Chimnasing in 1850. After they're being pushed out of their territory, they had traveled north, and some had moved south, and some had moved to Quebec too as well. So he states, an ancestor fled from the island and traveled north and stopped near Magnetawan. He married a member of the tribe living there and raised a large family. Eventually, the family moved back to Christian Island area before Sir John Colburn's cold water experiment. One of Leonard's ancestors was French and lived with his son at Coldwater. The family was eventually adopted by Chief Assence's band, one of the bands which comprised the Chippewas of Lakes Huron and Simcoe. So this was recording within the archaeological work in the history of Christian Island by the Museum of Archaeology in London, Ontario. We do have a copy at Chimnasing, and as well as there's another copy in the Huronia Museum in Midland, Ontario. But Leonard Meneg was a chief BFN from June 15th, 1954 to June 11th, 1956, and as well as from June 1964 to 1966. He was also administrator of the band too, and he was the father of William Meneg, one of my teachers and mentors, who had passed away just over a year ago now. And many of his children still live and carry on a lot of his teachings and goodwill today. His daughter right now is in council, Judy Jamison Meneg. So what I had found through some of my archaeological research was a lot of different plant signatures for the area of Southern Georgian Bay. Not too much on Chimnasing at this time period during the Anderson years, I guess we could call it, from 1828 to 1858. He did a lot of different recordings. Sometimes he was in the area, sometimes he wasn't. Sometimes others had done different recordings and had sent petitions on behalf of the different bands in the area. But this one here, I was able to find different documentation about John Meneg, and I found the Micdodem alongside his name on 4 different documents. A lot of different documents. I mean, sometimes his name was just signed. Sometimes, I mean, when we look at these documents, a lot of times it wasn't them signing their names. It was those interpreters that were there, or those traders that were in the area, or those ones helping out at Coldwater, whether they be the carpenters or the ones helping with the agriculture and so forth in different farms. But I thought this was neat because I had never imagined that there was a Beaver Clan within Chimnasing. All of throughout the years of research and talking with different community members and as well as different elders, um, I had never heard that anybody go by that clan before. And when I came up with when I found these different documents, I was flabbergasted. I was like, wow. I said, here we've got a nice little tie in terms of that 5 council fire wampum belt in terms of the area too as well. So these different documents, they come from different lists, petitions, like I said earlier, treaty annuity receipts, and lists of payments, and as well as surrenders to as well. He was John Meneg was one of the signatories on the 10 acres of land at what was known as Bar Point, or also Lighthouse Point on Chimnasing back in 1857. This treaty, unlike the other ones, it is labeled Treaty 76 on the front. And on the original, it doesn't state that, I mean, all these treaties, they were never really, they just kind of numbered them as they went along. They weren't really known as, okay, this is pre-Confederate Treaty number 5 or number 3. It's just the way the British had documented it. And in 1899, when that book of treaties and surrenders was published, I mean, they really categorized all the different treaties in there, and some not so much. But this one wasn't in there. I just wanted to make that point. So today in Chimnasing, the present day clan identification of the Meneg family is of the Maingan, Wabji, Pine Martin, Migaze, Mong, and Nisquatus. So some of these ones have, I mean, they carry on this oral history that these were their clans, and some of them I know, I mean, had perhaps were adopted into them, and as well as another one sought out an elder to find out his clan. So I thought it was just a nice combination, because I'd like to see and find out who in the family, I mean, goes by this clan. Even though you have the last name Meneg or last name King or so forth, it doesn't really identify your clan through your father's lineage. You've got to be able to track that information, do your ancestral research, talk with your aunties, your grandmas, your grandpas, and other relatives within your family dynamic, and understand your own history if you don't know it. I mean, a lot of people, unfortunately, know a lot about their families, which is quite astounding within a lot of different communities. So what I did from that was I kind of made a little family tree. Some of the throughout these presentations, I'm going to show some family trees. Not everybody I can do. These are just some things that I've jotted down in the past through my research. So we had John Meneg. He married Mary Meneg. I don't know what her maiden name was, but at this time period at Coldwater and the Narrows, and probably in many other different places, there was a lot of John and Marys. It gets kind of confusing because you go through different lists, different censuses, and so forth. But like I said, I mean, perhaps, I mean, I'm not too familiar within a lot of the history and early history of the family. These are just some of the documentary names that I have found and that they had identified and that were listed under them. So within this generation, within the first generation from John and Mary Meneg, we have Jonas Meneg, and he married Eliza Snake. Mary Meneg, I don't have any documentation, I think, in terms of who she married. George Meneg, he was born at Collingwood. He married Sarah Karagewan, or Sarah Peters. And George Meneg was also a chief of Chimnasing back in 1874. It was the second recorded election within Chimnasing's history, which I thought was pretty neat. The people were in an uproar as Chiefs John and James Assens had appointed David Assens as the head writer and interpreter, and had made him chief And the people were upset about this because they didn't think that he was right for the job. So they petitioned the government and were able to have an election. And I mean, there was some back and forth conversation between the Aston's brothers and as well as those ones petitioning against them, which is quite interesting. John Wesley Meneg, or in Severn, he had it was documented they had two different wives, Sophia Meneg and Pauline Meneg. Still trying to find some of the earlier documentation in terms of their names prior. Peter Meneg, Enoch, sometimes spelled with CH. I found a marriage registration of him marrying Alice Jackson, but I didn't find anything else after that. And then nothing else between Mary Gijgat. Later on, he was listed as a lodger with I think it was John Wesley or one of his brothers. And carrying on, Edward Meneg, Sophia, Elizabeth, or Lizzie, Louisa, Eunice. This one here, I couldn't really make out within the documentary source. It looked like it said Eunice, but then again, I could be wrong. It was just sometimes the writing gets away from the enumerators who are jotting it down. And then Esau Meneg. So this is a classic case. I mean, they talked about John Meneg being part Wentagogic, or being of the French lineage as well as Nishnabek lineage. When late Gerald Meneg was alive, I had sat down with him at a fire one time, and I had asked him where that name came from. I'd always wanted to know. One of the earliest documentations I have of that name is from the late 1840s, around 1846, I think. Nothing on any other censuses earlier that. But Gerald Meneg, he had stated, well, I thought we were French, he said. Within other members of the family, I had talked with, they had stated perhaps that name was Monomeg, catfish, and I do see that name on the list. So if it's a French name and they carried on their father's name, I just wanted to make the point that sometimes it didn't go by the father's lineage. In this case, and in some other cases I'll show, I mean, they carried on their mother's clan throughout, and then in some way in the mix, people started relations of these folks had started going by different clans.
Excuse me,
Another
Clayton.
member of the Beaver Clan, or Micdodem, was John Gabagabo Jones. John Jones was one of the chiefs at Coldwater. He was made a chief by Chief John Aston Sr. back in 1832 after another chief had passed away, Levi Shingaw-Contz. And Levi Shingaw-Contz had talked about how he wanted somebody from his band become, succeed him. And he talked about, John Aston had talked about when he passed away that he came from the Owen Sound area. So he states later in the late 1830s that he had raised John Jones to become chief, as a sub chief within that dynamic. So here we have different symbols. The first one here, it states Beaver. This was on a petition that Peter Jones was sending on behalf of the Chippewas of Lakes Huron and Simcoe to the king when he traveled to England in 1832-33 time period. And on that was John Kabagabo.
Clayton,
Yes.
we do have a couple questions in the chat and in the Q&A boxes.
Okay, I'll just check them out real quick. So here we have a clan, or a question. Have you ever heard of a wind clan or a star people? I met a woman, that's what she said. I didn't have a chance to ask her where she came from. Earlier within the presentation, we talked about that OESA or that tornado that kind of explains that. I have never met anybody of the Wind Clan or Star People Clan. I remember, what was it, about almost 2 years now, I did an exhibition down in Newmarket, and there was a gentleman who was working with the kids from local schools, and they had their art in the other part of the gallery, and they had descriptions or paintings on paddles and other things of many different clans, and they stated that was their clan. And apparently this person had said to them, well, your clan comes from the month you were born in. And so these kids, figuring out, the list he had given them and had painted those clans. This is, I had thought, well, I talked with the manager of the gallery and talked about cultural appropriation and so forth and understanding. I reached out to another person from Toronto, another artist friend of mine, and I had never heard of that before. I know we have different moon cycles, our 13 moons, and the different teachings behind each of those moons. Debate has come up whether there's, that cycle starts in January. I had often thought it started in the springtime, and how in terms of the teachings of the four directions, and how we came from the east, how life begins in the east, life begins in the spring, and so forth. But I've never heard of any Star People Clan before. That's a new one. Add it to the list. Just looking in the chat. Oh, what did I mean? What did you mean when you mentioned the dish with one spoon and the fourth council fire, that wampum belt? In terms of, well, at that meeting in 1840, John Buck describes the belt, and he describes the area within the territory of Minjikining and central Ontario of that abundance of game and sharing, Shelley. That was a question from Shelley Charles, and I just wanted to make a plug and say happy birthday, Shelley. I'm happy that you could join us today. So, which there's more descriptions about these belts. I had, within the information that I had found over the years, and as well as been directed and shown by other good friends of mine and those ones who make the belts. I created a chart describing the different documents listed. Some of them, a lot of them came from Peter Jones, interpreting the speeches of Chief Yellowhead, and as well as John Buck and those ones at that meeting in Minising. And they're labeled out in sections, and that can be found on the Neganing website, the Bosley First Nation Trust website, and that's open for anybody to see right now. It's quite a long list. It gives different documentary sources and so forth in terms of where those interpretations come from, because they're all kind of different in each section, a little bit here, a little bit there, and they come from different sources from the book that was published after the Reverend's death, and as well as from his anecdotal book, as well as from the meetings too, as well, and the rough meeting notes. So I can direct you to that afterwards, Shelley, and you can have a look-see. What does Nadu Wasaga mean? Nadu Wasaga, I heard, was well, one of the first questions I had about this was what does that mean? Because I heard, Anishinaabe and in the past have referred to their Haudenosaunee brothers as a snake people, and that meant snake. But I thought snake, translated in Anishinaabe one was in Ganabik. But when I talked with another elder, Bob Meneg, he had, and as well as the late Randy Kingbaugh, they had stated it's out there, it's over there, so to speak, in the back, around there. And I've seen different interpretations within documentary source that talks about how Nodway that they would say was at the mouth of the river. And that was, I mean, at the Blue Mountains was one of the many battle sites where the Anishinaabek and Allied forces had fought the Mohawks and other Haudenosaunee people. And in terms of pine marten, what is pine marten? Wabjishi. Through different Medewan teachings and other teachings, I had learned that this was a warrior clan that had adopted. It's also noted in the Mishona's book that had adopted those ones without a clan too as well. Other discussions I've had about this is that other clans have opened up adoption because the pine marten or Wabjishi Doodemag is getting too big, so to speak. It's getting really large. Is that it? Yep. Okay. So for those ones that are looking at the screen, here we have two different maps. The one on the lower left is from Gother Mann in 1788, and the other one is from the Admiral William Bayfield when he did his route around the Great Lakes. In 1788, he notes Gother Mann notes an Indian settlement down by what is known as Thunder Bay, and then he's reached out as Sturgeon Bay, is what is now called Colpoys Bay. Within Bayfield's map, he discussed the Indian winter encampment at the area around Owen Sound, and as well as kind of like a trading post over at Saugeen, Indian traders. Our people had many different villages and different sites all around this area, and many areas all the way across Anishinaabeg. Sometimes when archaeologists can't find any sources, they think that we weren't there. You know what I mean? But we had utilized different areas, you know, I mean, different clan territories, and those ones that were passed down through generations, and the sharing involved in terms of the river systems, in terms of the height of land, in terms of different burial grounds in the area too as well. I mean, a lot of our people had passed away while they're out in the fall time and throughout most of the winter, hunting and trapping and even into, you know, I mean, sapping and as well as into the fishing seasons too as well. Moving on within Chief John Kabagala Jones, we have he had made a memorial in about 1846, and he had talked a little bit about himself. He said he was the son of Shami Golkan Jones, and I thought that was neat. I thought, okay, we've got a kind of lineage here in terms of who he is, but I've never been able to trace that name anywhere within earlier records that I have looked through. Says he was born in Galt, or also known as Waterloo. He participated in the War of 1812 as well. He talks about in the memorial how he was there at Wasaga during the escape of the British and the battles that were going on there. And in the Pioneer Papers, it talks about that too as well. The Pioneer Papers of Simcoe County. I thought I was going to put that in here. I mean, it's didn't really make it in the edit, I guess. It's been a long week putting together this slideshow, but I can talk about that later and hopefully write about it a little bit more. He has stated that he was from Wasaga, Wasaga Bay. And in 1832, when John Assens had converted from Methodism to Catholicism, part of that band wanted to leave Coldwater and go, but they were convinced to stay. And it was at the time of the Coldwater Treaty that a lot of them had left back to Wasaga Bay and then would travel around the area. And in 1839, they had a lot of the people under Kabagala Jones had moved to what it was known as Big Bay. From that list, not everybody had went, but a lot is, I mean, almost just a little bit more than half had left, and the others stayed within the area within the chiefs at the Severn River and Bosley Island. He was a signatory of Treaty 66, which was really a parcel. And He passed away in 1852. He had left a will, and in his will, he had left his legacy to his son, Joseph Jones. But because Joseph Jones was not really of age at that time period, he was young. He was attending the industrial school at Alnwick, or also known as Alderville. And at this time period, there was many different students from across the territory who went to Alderville to learn how to read and write. But as a lot of the stories go within that time period, a lot of them felt like they were slaved into doing agriculture and working and weren't really getting a good education. A lot of them had escaped and moved home. And Anderson at the time would, he stated that he wouldn't pay the annuities to the parents unless they had come back. And even when they went back, if they wanted to go home, it would come out of their parents' annuities. It would be subtracted from that year's annuities, which wasn't much at this time period. Compared to what Anderson was getting paid, I think he was getting paid about 150 pounds a year, and the people themselves were receiving, anywhere from 5 to 8 pounds for their livelihood, and they didn't want them to hunt or fish or anything else anymore, right? So at that time period, the chiefs of Lakes Huron and Simcoe had stated that he will become chief once he is of age. And in that time period, Thomas Sky and John Smith will become co-chiefs at Copoise Bay. And later on, John Jones becomes chief at Copoise Bay in 1858. And this was another controversy where the agreement was that he would finish school, and he left school. He didn't want to go to school no more. So there was, I think there was a small school established at Nawash and Cape Croker at the time period. So he was still trying to attend there, but he ended up becoming chief, and he stayed chief until after the Copoise Bay Treaty. I think in 1864, around there was when he had they had amalgamated with the Cape Croker band, the Copoise Bay band, and he was to be the interpreter and writer, and they didn't even want him to do that at the time period. I haven't found any more information on that. I didn't really go searching too much, but that's a little bit about Joseph Jones, one of the children of John Gobble Gobble Jones. So more of the family of John Gobble Gobble Jones. We have John Smith, our Georgic, and here are some of his clan signatures. They've got a lot, both Johns, I guess you would say. His Anishinaabe name translates to Big Fisher. Smith's name first appears on a list from 1832 from the traders who have claims against the Assens and Yellowhead band. And as well as he was recorded as one of the employees that worked on a grist mill at Coldwater. His name, I've only found one document where it says Gichiojik. Is usually every time I've seen it, it was John Smith. And in the memorial too, as well, of John Jones, he states that John Smith is his brother. He had married a Charlotte Assens on April 8th, 1838. So how I figure, within the earlier slides of John Jones being of the Beaver Clan, his brother being of the Beaver Clan too. And a lot of these different symbols you can see, they look like otter as well, or they could be pine marten or what have you. But seeing how he married a member of the Assens band, and they were known as Nagig Dodem or otter. One of those clan laws was that you never married into your own clan. You didn't pursue that, whether they lived 100, 200, 300 miles away or whatnot. They're always your kin, they're your relative, and you treat them as such. So he was first recorded as chief in 1846, and he was a signatory of Treaty 93, the Cape Croker Treaty. And he moved up to Cape Croker with the rest of the Jones band at that time period in 1861. They were supposed to come to Christian Island, but they had made a deal with those ones at Nawash, and they ended up staying there and amalgamating their annuities and worked together and were given different plots of land. you know, I mean, at that time period when they moved, they lived at the Jones band lived with the Nawash band at Owen Sound. They just didn't go right up to Cold Boys Bay. It was about between the years 1847 49 that they started establishing themselves at Cold Boys Bay and creating homes and so forth. Henry Jones Hesbun and Thomas Jones, as well as I see relationships here. I never found anything stating that they were brothers. Just going back to the last name and the clan signatures as well. They talk about like, their names always are together, and being of the Jones family at that time period. You know, there's different people with the name Jones too as well, but these ones residing in Wasaga, it's like either their brothers or their cousins, or they're utilizing they're the same family dynamic regardless. Anishinaabe name relates to raccoon, and there's other ones named Henry and Thomas too as well in the area. Henry, Thomas, John, it all carries on. Even Henry Jones Jr., not the one from Harrison Ford movies, but he was another one who helped out within the band, and some of them had come back over to Chimney too as well. They would go back and forth. And one document, Thomas Jones, Henry Jones's son was, or Henry Jones' brother was born at Goderich. Another one says Blue Mountain. So within different lists, there's always different dates, different places where they lived, and different time periods of when they were born, different months. It varies from enumerator to enumerator, whoever was writing it down. So we have some more of the Beaver Clan. I'm just going to kind of go through. I didn't realize I was going to talk so much, so we got a lot of slides to go through. Another one was Gishkabus. I haven't found a translation. I think it would mean something like cutting through or something like that. I had asked our elders this, but they couldn't. They just understood the cutting part. I had seen Gishkabut on different treaty from the credit in Toronto area back in 1805, and I see that Gishkabut name. So I don't know if it's the same person or just a relation. I have to double check within that Gishkabut if it was the same clan. But James and Gishkabus, Jacob too, as well as son, they had, after the band had moved to Bosley Island after Coldwater, and then later on, after a couple of treaties, had moved to Christian Island in late 1850s. These guys didn't stick around as they had moved forward and moved north. A lot of our people were always trying to escape from the non-native population within the areas. Sometimes relations weren't as good, but his family carries on and moves on up to Shawnigaw area. And some of the last recordings I have of Jacob and his family were from, I think, 1894, somewhere around there. These are some of the different symbols that I had found of that Beaver Clan, and still showing its presence within the territory. There was a 7-mile portage from Pentanguishene to the area known as Balm Beach. Anderson talks about it a little bit, and as well as another description from Bonnycastle, another writer and traveler within the Great Lakes territory in the 1840s. And he talked about the opening of the portage being occupied by an Indian encampment, and there being no good water near it, we resolved to proceed southeasterly along the beach for about a mile, where we found a little runnel of ice cold water tumbling. Those are our people. They always knew where the water was. They always made encampments. He talked about when they finished the portage that he came upon the encampment, but nobody was there. So it just goes to show that, I mean, our people were always out and about and utilizing the territory the best they can. Another one of the Beaver clans is the Tababadong family at Wasaksing. My grandmother, she was a Tababadong. Her mother was Clara, large family, And, talking with my mother last night, I had asked her, I said, Grandma ever talk about clans or anything like that? And she had said, no, she didn't really talk about that too much. I don't know. My grandfather was a minister. My grandmother, she had known a lot about different medicines and so to speak, and the language and so forth. But when it came to the culture, it wasn't much talked about. Her grandmother, um, had what she had it was married to Dan Tababadong, and after Dan passed away she had married Thomas King, and Thomas King was noted as being one of the last Medewans at Perry Island in the 1920s, and sharing that information, so I'm sure some of that stuff was passed down. But here are some different variations of the name. I know some of the family goes by the Beaver Clan, and there's only been a couple of clan marks that I've been able to find through my research. So within that, Tababadong married Shabal, and we have their oldest, Marianne Tababadong, who married Harry Musquatus. Some of this family and their descendants are at Chimising now within the Jameson family. They also had a child named Harriet Tababano, who married Isaiah Assens. I forget who Isaiah's father was at the moment. But after, it is said when Isaiah passed away in 1899 that he was found along the tracks and was oxing, and they don't know what happened. A lot of people said he had been murdered, but nothing was ever looked into after this. Charles Tababadong as well, and I didn't find too much information on Charles after 1880, so I think he might have passed away at a young age. And Daniel Tababadong married Jane Asa Potawatomi, who had come from Wisconsin in 1837. Well, her mother had come from Wisconsin in 1837, and no, her mother was born here. It's her grandfather who came from around Shabe Wawagani as well. So some of the relatives of the Tababadong family, I've been working on this family tree for over a year now, and my apologies for those that weren't who are participating. It'll be done soon. It's just so extensive that some things that we'll have to have a meeting like this to go over the new findings from my meeting with you guys almost a year ago. So here we have Susan, Simon, Peter Tababadong, Elijah, whose descendant is Gima Tababadong now, who just got reelected last week. Stephen, Frank, Johnson or Johnny, and he married Christina Jane Nanabush, one of my direct ancestors as well. And then we have Elizabeth or Chilizzi, Gallant King, Mary Gallant King, Walter Marks, Alfred, Edward Tababadong. So Chilizzi lived on the island too as well and married Walter Marks from Chimising. Alfred married Lucy Pamajuan, and there was another Daniel Arthur Brooks. He passed away at a young age, and then my Chichinokamis Claire Tababadong. A couple years ago, I traveled on the Powell Trail with my father and my uncle Pete, which was an awesome experience. This was after I got out of Chief and Council, and he had my uncle had told me. I said, "Well, how was it? With your uncles, living in New York and across the way from Buffalo, and what did they do, and what happened to their father?" My grandmother had a different father than her younger brothers and sister. She was the daughter of a man named Archie Dodge from southwestern Ontario, and story has it that he had, he was one of those guys who traveled from reserve to reserve, so to speak, and had a child with Clara. But later on, Clara had met Alfred Elliott, and they had 5 children, I do believe, and they had moved down to Buffalo, and those ones had moved and lived in different places in New York and so forth. But when I asked my uncle, I said, "What happened to Alfred then?" I said, how long did he live? He goes, "I didn't know him. He passed away when I was a young man, and nobody or he didn't say he passed away. He said he just disappeared. So we didn't know where he was. You don't know if he left or if something bad happened to him. But through my research, I was able to find his death certificate, and it said he was found at Fort Erie and he had drowned. So they said it was an accidental drowning, but I don't know what could have done because he was across the river at that time period. Many different stories that come of this, but that's just more family lore. Whether he was killed or not, we don't know. So more of the McDodem that I found in different areas from Shawnigan and Nasan and Sandy Island. Mukdegijik, Black Sky, Obabama, Jawagijik, Mase Makwe, and a Mick from the San territory. This is one of the only documents I see a Mick in any of those lists that I've been able to find throughout the years. I'm sure there's more out there and more people that go by this clan in areas. I just, I mean, I haven't met anybody that carries that clan from those northern First Nations, but it's not unlikely because of those ones from Magnetawan and Henvey and around there, and those descendants of the Mi'kmaq people. I read a report regarding that, the non-treaties treaty in Mi'kmaq. I forget who it was by, but they talked about Maingan having come back in that territory and settling and living and so forth. Not too sure where Maingan was or where he was brought up, but I thought that was interesting. So from there, we're moving to the Otter clan or Nigig Dodem. As well as that earlier travel story we had. We have another one from John Simcoe exploring Penetanguishene Bay with his wife and several others, Robert Pilkington and as well as some Anishinaabe guides directing him the way. He stopped at different places along the way and he started naming everything in creation after his father and different other military people. And he had met Kanice in Cook's Bay there, and there was runners that had left Cook's Bay to inform the chiefs up there at Matchedash that he was coming. So when after they had arrived, they were met with I forget how many ducks, but they were met with a reception when they arrived at Cowan's trading post in Matchedash Bay. Now, this is a reproduction of the trading post. It is said that the trading post had a stockade around it to where he would only let certain people in. So this is kind of an exaggeration of what's called the chimneys at Matchedash Bay. And at that time period, the weather was too bad there in the fall time, so they could only make it to Bosley Island. But when they got back to Matchedash, Simcoe had stated that, or it is stated within the diary of Lady Simcoe, that he had promised them a keg of rum, which should be delivered the day of his departure from the bay, and told the chief that he would send him from York a silver medal and a flag, the usual badges of distinction, which this chief had not yet received. They then shook hands and went off well satisfied. This is this is a medal that is entrusted within the Assens family. What I did was I kind of found the interpretation of the Latin there, and it says, and when interpreted, it says, "May he be shamed who thinks badly of it. God in my right, by the grace of God," which I thought was interesting because I don't know if Anishinaabe knew that this translated into that and the medal. I mean, would they still be wearing it? I mean, personally, it's kind of frustrating. It's almost like you're pledging yourself to the king, which at that time period we had a lot of, I mean, sometimes it happened, but I don't know. There's a lot of discourse within a lot of the settlers that are coming in the area. So within that medal, we have the different time periods, some of the different time periods. And my buddy Brian Charles, he talked to me. He let me know. He goes, yeah, find a distinction of these medals, I mean, that don't have dates on them by the age of King George and how many buttons he's got on his coat. I mean, the more buttons, the older the the older the medal, he stated, which I thought was pretty neat. So here we have the Assens family medal in pre-1801 and post-1801. So I do believe that even though there's no name of the chief at Matchedash named, during this visit that, I mean, it was Assens, and he was known chief at the time period, and they have carried this medal. The Assens family over time through senior and junior and his brother, I found different recordings that they received several other medals, but this one is the only one within, I think that's in trust with the family. There was about five times around there that they received medals. They say they lost their father's medal, they received a flag and another medal, and so forth, as well as after the rebellion of 37 and the reception of the Prince of Wales and Sarnia in 1860. So we have the original manuscript here of the Penetang Purchase, the provisional agreement in 1795. Surrender a little track, and the English was willing to give the Nishnabek 100 pounds. It was actually 101 pounds. And those ones that signed the document were James Givens, George Cowan, an interpreter, and Alexander Akins, who was the father of the Reverend John Jones and William Johnson Chew, as well as another one, William Keeper, I do believe. So Assens didn't sign this agreement. Some within the oral histories of the band have interpreted that mark and that name, Pawe Kamagishkang, as that he came in place of Assens at this time period. And Shabandishkam and Gosson and Wabanon Gong. So later on, in 1838, or 1798, there was another treaty made to solidify that in terms of the goods, and Assens did sign this one. So some more of the different signatories from the British side that were on this, as well as George Cowan, again, the interpreter. I'll get into more of George Cowan in later series in discussing his influence and his family's influence in the area and relationship to the Assens band. So here we have Great Council Rock, another documentation of clan signatures. In comparison, within this, we have inconsistencies. Within the provisional agreement was made in York in May 19th, 1795. We're on the rock, it says May 11th. Other inconsistencies, Alexander Aiken spelt with a T before the K in the original document and throughout his lifetime. And also there's only three different clan signatures on this. And at most points, I haven't seen a lot of documentation with the eyes being in the clans too as well. Whether this is real or not, I mean, I've read a report regarding it. I've talked with other colleagues about it. I don't know personally. I mean, down in the bottom right corner, it kind of looks like an eagle talon too as well. I think until we finally have some scientific proof and evidence regarding this rock, that will come to light, hopefully in the future. So some of his clan signatories, Chief Assens Sr. throughout the years are seen here from 1798, about a month prior to his passing. So different ones, letter of authorization from James Morrison to build more houses at Bosley Island, letters of for supplies of requisition, the Coldwater Treaty or Pre-Confederate Treaty number 48, also 16, and provisional agreement of 1811, which was a precursor to Treaty 16. They made a treaty, but they didn't have the supplies because the war was going on, so they needed the supplies at that time period. And then later after the war, they wanted to make that Penetang Machine Road from Barrie up north, so they wanted they had made this treaty. The death of John Assens was recorded by his brother on July 12, 1847. States, I beg to inform you that my brother Chief John Assens came to an untimely end by drowning on Saturday evening last. He was returning home from his canoe, went home in his canoe alone from the white settlements, and it appears from the testimony of one of the tribe who had been to the settlement with him that my brother had been drinking. In the melancholy state, I fear his soul returned to his maker. We have held a council and have laid information against the whites who gave them the spirits or liquor before two magistrates. And it is a determination of the tribe to present as much as possible the spread of this evil. The tribe wished to hear from you on the appointment of another chief in the place of the departed. So this was sent to Captain Thomas Gummersall Anderson at the time period. So finding out the dates of his actual death, I went in records and calendars and was able to find that it was July 10th. So here we have a couple of descendants of Chief Assens, Clayton and Dennis. In the document here, they talk about John Assen's passing again. And this was signed by the chiefs and warriors of Christian Island. It says, first, when we were living together in Coldwater, we was all Methodists. But when the priest came, we began to have trouble. And when old Chief John Assens joined the Catholic Church, and we began to have trouble. He was a good man before he joined the church, and after he joined there, he became a drunkard. At last, when he was drinking, he upset his canoe and drowned. And after he got drowned, they went away to Meneg Island. So he's talking about the people that left Bosley Island at about the same time that John Assens had passed away. And some of them had come back from South Bay and Chagin and so forth. And I mean, from the stories of the Assens family, they had stated that some of them had stated that he was killed, that he didn't drown. But obviously at the time period, there wasn't a lot of law in the area to be able to investigate it. So that story has been carried down. So here we have kind of overview of Chief John Assens. So from here was, I forget which report that they stated he was 75 years old when he died. And that's mistaken me now. But he was the head chief of not only the Otter Clan, but the Anishinaabek, Matchedash Bay, Coldwater, and Bosley. He signed Treaty 5, Provisional Treaty 1811, Treaty 16, and also the first Saugeen Fishing Island lease in 1834 with Medwayash and I forget the other chief now, and the Coldwater Treaty. So he was born circa 1770, 1772, and he fought in the War of 1812 and was also one of the head chiefs and leaders in participated in the 1837 rebellion from November 1838 to February 1839. They were held up and cordoned off the area and Holland's Landing. He also had 3 wives, but when the conversion to Methodism had taken place, he had to only have one. So the story goes from what Reverend Jones writes, that it was the older sister that picked him. It wasn't him that picked his wife. I think the youngest one had stepped up and said that she would be the wife, and the older sister had kind of scalded her and said, "Nuh-uh." So therefore, he had stuck with the older one. I'm not too sure the names of the other sisters, though. And as well, they had him and his followers of the Catholic portion of the band had moved to Bosley Island around 1840. So here's a picture from Titus Hibbert Ware from Coldwater in 1844, and then some more in 1845. Here's a diagram of Coldwater Village by Thomas Boyd, one of the contractors there. He notes different buildings and proposes different areas in terms of the present office, doctor's quarters, so forth, cows, pigs, poultry area, and also boys' playgrounds and girls' playgrounds. And after the treaty, he wanted to get some land, so he made another diagram in terms of what was there at present. He talked about the Indian house, superintendent's house, schoolhouse, and as well as Chief John Assens' house in number 4, and other Indian houses, the sawmill, grist mill, where the river was, and the mill flumes in terms of where they channeled water from the river and made like log chutes and so forth for the mill. So I took a trip with my sons in about 2017 down the Coldwater River, and we had a good canoe trip going down there, and we stopped for ice cream right by the mill and got out, and I took some photos of different areas where I had thought that these houses were. Now, originally, one of these houses were supposed to be for Chief Yellowhead, um, but obviously he settled at the Narrows and built a house over there in Aurelia. But here we have on the lower left the post office, which was house number 2, where the Aurelia or the Coldwater Public Library is, and is the area in around where the schoolhouse was, and then the Shell gas station in around where Chief Assens's house was. Now, when we walked in the library, I wanted to see what kind of references they might have to our history and whatnot, but they didn't have too much. But I asked about the building and about the land with the local librarian, and she had given me stories about different happenings that had been going on for years in that building, and that, I mean, how haunted it has been in the past. I don't know. I just got out of there. I didn't. My kids were kind of antsy, so I couldn't really look as much as I could while I'm in library. So we had carried on and followed the canoe trip back up the river. So here we have other family descendants. Thomas Assens, he married Anna Assens. In 1838 listing of those ones that participated in the rebellion, there was a lot of Anishinaabe names are in these lists. And under the Assens list, we had Thomas and then Awabos. I just, at this time period, I don't know anybody else named Thomas under this list. The other Thomas Jones was under the Wasaga faction. So I kind of put one and one together and figured that this could be his brother's Anishinaabe name. I mean, obviously they had different Anishinaabe names too as well, besides Assens. So kind of put that one together. He was also a chief around 1845 to 1850. He stayed in the area of Coldwater too as well. He didn't go with his brother to Bosley Island, and he chilled out with Chief Peter Karagewan as well as others within the area. And he also, asked his family and told me that he was also the first settler of Chimnasing at Christian Island. Others state that it was Ogamowajuan. But I'll get into that story when we get to the King family in another portion of the series. So we have a new head chief appointed from Thomas Assens' letter from what I described earlier to Captain Anderson visiting with them in September. He has stated that he appointed his eldest son, whose name is also John, to fill the situation of head chief. But in February, the band still didn't know who was chief. I don't know why they would be asking Anderson who the next chief would be in the first place, but they stated that at this time period they held an election, and that going by what Anderson had informed them, that it should go to the eldest son, and that the eldest son was James Assens, and that they had elected him chief. But later on, the chieftainship went to John Jr. for some reason. I don't know. I haven't found that out yet. But regardless, James and John Assens Jr. had presided over the well-being of the band for many, many years. So here's some more information on John Assens Jr., signatories with his father and his uncle, and some other ones in terms of requisitions of Dr. Vautry and other treaties that he has signed. Treaty 66, 76, the Islands Treaty, Lighthouse Surrender, both lighthouse surrenders. One was for 10 acres and another one was for another 28 acres for lighthouse purposes on Christian Island or Chimnasing. And also his name is listed as being one of the principal chiefs at Bosley Island in 1860. I mean, we have this history that the band had, as soon as the Islands Treaty was made in 1856, that everybody moved and jumped ship and went to Christian Island. Through my documentary research and so forth, I've found, it was a gradual transition of those ones moving. I mean, was noted that the Potawatomi people were living on Christian Island, as well as the Dawa that had come from Michigan, and as well. So when the list was being made up of those ones that were going to the Grand Council in 1860 down in Sarnia, John and James Assens were listed as the principal chiefs at Bosley Island. And I had found other documentation from their councils at Bosley Island prior to this, and it was shortly after this time period in the summer that I found other council documents and documentation of them being at Christian Island. So the debate's still on. So here are some more of James Assens's signatures and his clan documentation, as well as that list from Holland Landing. I don't know if this is him or not, like same with Thomas. I mean, Bebamash could have been his Anishinaabe name. It's hard to decipher because this one is the only one I see as JAS, and usually that stands for James, and many other different documents and throughout time as well within those ones that recognize their name. So forth too as well, just like his brother, they had worked together. Both brothers were still being paid as chiefs after the election of 1874 when George Meneg was elected. They were receiving pensions too as well, and carried on being paid as a chief until his passing in 1884. So when they went to Sarnia, a lot of those chiefs who had went down there received a Queen Victoria medal. And I know that Ogumawaj was one of the representatives from Christian Island, as well Jima Chinago, or the descendant or the ancestor of the Sandy family. And that family has one of those medals too in their possession. So perhaps John and James both received a medal too as well, but I haven't seen it. Perhaps it's in the family somewhere or in some ancient chest in the basement, who knows? But I'm pretty sure they would have received these medals too as well when they had met the Prince of Wales, Edward Albert. Another undocumented chief within our list was William Assens, another brother of John and James, I do believe. He was a counselor too in the late 50s. Early on, his name was on the Coldwater School Report and those debt lists, and he also helped build the grist mill. And as well as that William, that's the only William I see in terms of the muster list. And as well as one of a few clan signatures I see from William in 1854 here from a receipt of payment for annuities. So he was at Christian Island, and then he went back to Bosley Island, and he stayed there at Bosley Island with those ones who didn't want to leave. A lot of the different families, the Simon family, Corbiers, Tobys, and onward, stated. The Reverend Alan Salt, who was missionary at Chimnasing and as well as Perry Island and other places, kept a great journal, I would say. It's a pretty long journal. It is in the archives. It is available online. I was combed through it probably about 3 times since finding it. But in there, he talks about his trips going to many different places along Georgian Bay. And from the one instance, he talked about how he hired James King, a Potawatomi who I baptized about 2 years ago at Perry Island camp meeting, to go with me to Bosley Island. My son Wellington also accompanied us in a boat where we cordially received by the chief William Assens. It was in the first time he had noted as William Assens as being the chief. They had also had different meetings and religious services there in the old church. So here we have another document with James, John Meneg, and William Assens as counselors. So he was born at Coldwater in about 1819, participated in the war 1837, or in the rebellion in 1837, and he passed away in 1879, when Salt found out, he went and did services over there. And it's noted that he was married to a Rachel Salmon, also known as the Simon family. And in one of his in his daughter's wedding registry, his wife's name was Mary. So I don't know if this is the same, or not Mary, Sarah, sorry. So I don't know if the names of the people are the same or if he married again. A lot of those kind of records are invisible, but I mean, there's a lot of different oral stories and other family trees from the different families. So here we have different chiefs of the Assens family, from John Senior all the way down to William P. Assens, and was last chief of Chimnasing, or last Assens family chief of Chimnasing in 1918. William Assens had a lot of William P. Assens, sorry, not William Assens of Bosley Island, but William P. Assens at the bottom of the list. He did a lot of different things for the people at Chimnasing, helped them out, helped the Potawatomis out. He helped out within the different meetings within the non treaty areas, as they would call it, in terms of the Williams Treaty. He helped, he was the head chair of a lot of those meetings in terms of moving things forward with the government. So he did a lot of work after he was chief too as well. And we have Noah Assens, David Assens, Samuel Assens, David Assens, and so forth. How's everybody doing?
We do have a few questions, Clayton.
Okay. Sorry. I've never heard of a hummingbird clan, Bill. Sorry. The source for Isaiah Assens' death, Mary, is his death registration. So it states that on there. In terms of, is this a precursor to residential schools in terms of the industrial schools? Yes, it is. It was something that they put in place in different areas, Manitoulin, Muncie, and so forth, and carried on, where they took a quarter of our annuities and put it towards a school. But a lot of the different First Nations had different amounts of treaty annuities coming to them each year. So therefore, everybody's their pocket was taken pretty good at that time period. And like I said before, those kids who wanted to go home but ran away and couldn't go home, or they ran away, I mean, they would charge the band back for that money they had to pay for sending them home. How strict am I, or how strict are the rules about being your father's Dodem? My son relates more to my clan, the May, and to my husband's, which would be Martin, because his dad was Jagnosh, but his mom was Makwa. I'm not strict at all, tell you the truth. I mean, I feel whatever spirit guides you with, I guess you would say. There's going to be many other different sources I'm going to show where those ones had, I mean, when their father was a Jagnosh, that they carried on their mother's Dodem too as well. So that's some people might think differently, but that's just my own personal thoughts. I think that's it for the questions. Karen, yeah.
There've been a couple comments in the chat box as well.
I know we're going kind of overboard here in terms of time, right?
And we've got a few more questions popping up in the Q&A boxes as well.
Sorry, guys, I'm just looking over. Yeah, we're getting on to Kigadons. Thanks, Eric. Okay. Within the Pamajuan family, we're gonna head that probably next week. Okay, we're gonna talk about Karagewan or Kigwin, or I've asked different translations for this name, and it's been tough to come out. I mean, we all know that name, Mukade, for black, the color black. A lot of our Anishinaabe speakers just say Kade. So when I heard them say Kade, immediately came back to Karagewan. Thomas Peters or Thomas Karagewan had noted that his father's name translated to spotted feather. So I don't know if this was the correct spelling for that, or if it just got butchered along the way. But here I show Gimal Peters or Peter Karagewan in the different documents that he had signed throughout a part of his lifetime. Anyways, he was one of the chiefs of the Assens band, sub chief, I guess some would say. He started attending council right before the Coldwater Treaty. He wasn't a signatory to it though, but he was one of the leaders of the Methodist portion of the Assens band, and had carried on and stayed at the Severn River and Coldwater, and as well as Potato Island or Openaconning. So here we have a different letter. We have another letter about him wanting to move to Bosley Island and join John Assens there, and that he wants to take his people with him. He wants different furnishings and homes to be put up, and he wants to be settled away from the Assens band too as well. But there's different other signatures. I didn't want to show the different signatures because I don't want to spoil it for later next week. So he had requested about 20 homes to be built on the island. So it made a map saying the division of the island where John Assens's band was settled up at where Camp Kitchakoana is now. And that's where the old Catholic remnants of the old Catholic Church was, and as well as the Karagewan band being down south of that in terms of the old village by Cedar Springs. So here I just showed a different map, and in terms of the drawing, he was pretty spot on in terms of his drawing. But they didn't get 20 houses built for them. I think they only got about 10, somewhere around there, that were built for the people. But again, carrying on more, I didn't find too many records in terms of Jim Morrison building anymore after this. Some of his relations in one council meeting, Jonas Mizonquit had taken his brother's place in council as he was out hunting. Within another document and census report from 1891, you have Thomas Sky listed as the uncle of William Peters, who is the son of Karagewan, and as well as some of their clan signatures. There's different Skies, 8 different people with the name Thomas Sky and Luke Sky. These ones were part of perhaps the Otter clan. Like I said, never seen anything written with where it said Otter beside their name. I kind of, within all the different, probably about over 100 different documents I've seen him sign with the Assens brothers, they all look the same. But then again, I could be wrong. But then again, there was other families at Saugeen that were part of the Wasaga faction too, named Thomas Sky and Luke Sky, and they went under Ginoje or the Pike clan. So it kind of confuses things when you don't see the clan signatures. Another one of the pictures from Titus Hibbert Ware at Coldwater. So perhaps this might be a picture of one of those leaders, either Thomas Assens or Karagewan. I was fortunate enough to make contact with Miss Barbara Wall. She was a partner of the late Stuart King, and she had passed on a nice book about the Georgian Bay Potawatomi. Some of the documents are variations of these documents I have in other lists regarding the King family, but this one has a lot more to it, which is really good. It doesn't really give a date, whether it was Stuart who compiled it, I'm not too sure. A lot of documents these documents don't have any dates on them. It's a pretty good book, but here it discusses their lineage, so to speak, with the Potawatomi people. So this one here was describing how Karagewan's wife was a Gijigo Kwe. They had 3 children, Wabanesi or William Peters, Kagiwa Ganabi, Thomas Peters, and as well as Sarah Peters. There's no Anishinaabe name for Sarah Peters, but I thought it was cool because it kind of matched up with some other um, spellings I had regarding Thomas Peters and William Peters. Well, just Thomas Peters. I never found William Peters' Anishinaabe name, but I thought this was pretty neat. Talks about the intermarriage too as well, and how she came with her father in 1835. Carrying on with the documents, Thomas Peters married Mary Kupgog, and they had two daughters, Louisa Peters and Christina Peters. And she says, I, Louisa Peters, married one James Smith, a member of my band, also a descendant of the Potawatomi Indians referred to namely, and their children there. So for the Smith family, Peters family, and King family, and also I mean those ones there is a little bit more awesomeness here. I'm sure some of the descendants had this document within their personal files. And carrying on from that book, there's some more documentation regarding Sarah Karagewan, or Sarah Peters, who married George Meneg, the earlier chief I had talked about, and their children. So the ancestry here, we've got Jonas, Peter, Thomas. I do believe are all brothers. And then Peter Karagewan, he was born in Wasaga, and Wasaga. I think that translates to that light shining from the sky, that beautiful light coming down. When I looked up that name, I think Wasis means child as well, but I'll have to do a double check with my auntie Gloria on that one. And as well as William Peters being born at the Severn River about this time. Thomas being born at Potato Island, where a lot of the Potawatomis were. They were back and forth from all sorts of different places, but they did have a little village site there during the 40s, and as well as George Meneg of the Beaver Clan being born at Collingwood, and there was a clearing there too as well for our people. So with William Peters, some of the descendants here, if you can trace your lineage to these people, this is as far as I'm going to go. I didn't really get too far into it. I'm sure the family knows their lineage. Some of these dates are just the earliest dates I found. Like I said before, there's lots of different dates stretching different time periods, sometimes 10 years. So Almer, Elizabeth, Peter Peters, Kane Peters, Agnes, Amelia, and John Peters. And we have Thomas Peters and Mary Kupgog, Louisa Peters, Christina Peters, and Wilfred Peters. And I'm trying to think, they married into the Ritchie family and the Williams family, or Christina, I think, married into the Ritchie's family, and Louisa married into the Smith family. So within Sarah and George, they had Amelia, Catherine, Angus, Stephen, Joshua, Carolyn, George, and Emma. There's more to it, and there's more stuff. I just didn't really have enough time to make it through it to get it all out. But I mean, there's more things in the censuses that are online within the Library and Archive Service and the Ancestry.com and so forth. I haven't figured out where Morrison's Corners is, but I'm sure I'll ask one of my more knowledgeable friends. So Gimal Kigidonts or Nigig Dodem. I tied it back to Nigig because I know of the relationship with Georgina Island and the big canoes there. And I know that some of them go by Nigig Dodem, and as well as the clan signatures too. But I've never seen anything written beside the clan signatures or any relationship documented. But they know whether I'm right or I'm wrong. Only the family knows. So he was born about 1770, passed away 1831. His wife, the only documentation we have is the widow Sacco, another chief at Nawash. Originally, he came from the Ohio Valley, and he was said to be one of the brothers of Tecumseh, who settled along the shores of Lake Huron with others prior to the War of 1812, and settled at the mouth of the Sabo River, also known as Chief's Point, just north of Saugeen by the fishing islands. 1832, in the Christian Guardian, they talked about Thomas McGee, John Thomas Assens, Alexander Chief, or Medway Osh, John Thomas Smith, William Herkemeyer, and Peter Jones, all converted Methodist Indians, came to Saugeen territory as native speakers. And From the History of Saugeen Indians by Mr. Schmaltz, he stated from the Cape Croker Band records that the importance of Peter Jones' visit was decisive. He baptized Keegadonts, a Sioux, whose father had come from the state of Ohio and settled at Nawash Village. His name was changed from Keegadonts to Peter Keegadonts Jones after the Mississauga missionary. Now I know that in other documentations that Keegadonts was debating whether to become Christian or not. He had an agreement with Waywaynash. I mean, if one would do it, the other one would do it. Later on, Chief Keegadonts ended up going down to Toronto and became part of the Methodists down there. Here we have different documentations from Peter Jones when they traveled along Lake Huron, spreading the word. And he stated that in July 1829 that they had passed already Saugeen area where they only found about 25 Anishinaabe there, and they had carried on towards the St. Clair River and had not gone too far from, well, they were at Goderich at this time when they left, so they started towards St. Clair, and they had met up with Chief Keegadonts, and it stated that he was the father of our fellow traveler Thomas Big Canoe. So later on, the next day, they started their journey, and Thomas Big Canoe came to ask if he could allow him to return with his father to Saugeen and give instruction there. So I thought that was pretty cool. I know a lot of the Big Canoe family know this. A lot of the Jones descendants know this. So it's a pretty good tie-in terms of those ones that Shingaming and Chimnasing Joyan. So it's and we see that throughout. There's many other connections. We're just, you look at the connections of our First Nations, and it looks like a big giant dream catcher because we're everywhere. So within, after Chief Assens had converted to Catholicism, he wrote the bishop, and he wrote in the following: Father, I have one more thing which I wish to say and request our father at York to look into. About the year 1811, 4 of Keegadonts' women disappeared and were afterwards found in the edge of the water where there was not water enough to drown a child. They must have been killed. This happened at Saki, near the present Goderich settlements, about the year 1816. About the year 1816, a man and his daughter, Indians, disappeared in the woods near the same place. And last fall, 1831, the chief Ogama Keegadonts disappeared and was afterward found on land dead, and his head bruised and mangled in such a way as to make it evident that he had been murdered. We do not believe the whites would do this, but from some unknown people of our own color lurk about to shed blood. So John Assens, he thought it was one of our own Anishinaabe who had done this. But again, there wasn't much law in the area to investigate it and so forth. I don't know, maybe some of them were upset that he had converted. It's not, that's just a theory. So here are different signatures, clan marks of Keegadonts' son, Peter Keegadonts Jones. And he lived from 1812 to 1910. And a picture of one of his children, Charles Keegadonts Jones, who lived to be 100 and was also a chief at Nayash, Shingaming. So here's different clan marks throughout some time periods with Peter J. Hopefully there's somebody from this family that's partaking today to shed a little bit of light on whether they're Nigig Dodem or other. Carrying on within the San area, we have Chief Alexander, who was on that voyage, so to speak, going from different place to place to teach Christianity with Peter Jones and the rest of them. He was one of the signatories of Treaty 45 and a half in 1836, as well as other treaties. But prior to this, there isn't a lot of information on the San. When I say San, I mean Saugeen Ojibwe Nation and the territories to the west of us. I do find the name Medwayash in a list from Coldwater Narrows census of 1834, and under that list are a lot of those ones from Perry Island and Sandy Island and Shawniga. who were labeled under the pagan faction, so to speak, the traditional people who didn't convert. So I know that there was an old chief, name's escaping me now, that who could have been the son of Medweash, whether it was Alexander Medweash or there was another Medweash who had, I mean, Chief Alexander as one of his sons, and the other one, I can't really pronounce that old name, but I'll bring it up next week because there's an awesome map too as well with it that shows different names of the rivers up there along the North Shore or the eastern North Shore. So other possible Nigig Doodemag from the Son, Sandy Island, and Chimnasing, George Ryerson, the Washington. Some of these names I don't really want to pronounce. My Anishinaabe one isn't that great. I only know Bungi a little bit, but here are some others. And one of them is Solomon Jack, who represents the, I mean, it looks like a beaver or an otter clan. Mijakodo, another chief there at Port Carling, Wachinong. I couldn't really make out this one was Louisan or something like that. I'm not too sure. And John Miller. John Miller was one of the families from Rama that came to Bosley Island. The band was all three bands were gonna amalgamate in the late 1840s. There was a lot of discussion at many time periods about amalgamating back again, getting land at Hog Bay, getting land in the interior, and so forth. But this family had thought, okay, we're gonna move together. Well, I'm gonna go. So he ended up going to Chimnasing. So after all my research over the years, I never found a document with clan signatures from the Bosley band. There was a lot of just names and X's and so forth. This one here from 1854 doesn't show all the clan identifications, but it shows a good enough portion of them, which I thought was pretty cool. And again, we have James Gishkabus and John Meneg as a Micdodem and Assens brothers, and some caribou too as well, or reindeer, a dick. Philip Jack again. So earlier, I mean, I showed Solomon Jack, who had a kind of like a beaver or otter clan. This Philip Jack is recognized, and same with his son, recognized with the reindeer, a dick. I don't know the relationship there, but I do know that the Jack family was part of the Wasaga faction. They lived in Wasaga. They have an island named Jack Island down there, which was named after the family, and that's recorded within the pioneer stories, pioneer history of Simcoe County, and some others too as well. No mark for Guaden, no. Mark Guaden or the Marks family. I've never found one, but the family has told me that they're Mukwad Odem or Bear Clan. And we have Asanawaka Gijik. We'll talk about him in the future, probably next week, and some more. So a lot of people weren't there. They were signing on their behalf, and this wasn't. I mean, sometimes they were at Penetanguishene, they were out hunting. I mean, the annuities always came sometime in the fall or early spring when our people were out doing what they do. I mean, harvesting and so forth. KK Combs doesn't. It's just a mark, but I know it's a Dictodem, and next week we'll get into that clan a little bit more, or I'll show a whole lot and a lot of different other stories too as well. Same with information about the Winnettas, so a lot more. I don't know what the circle is here beside Betsy Miller. I don't know if that could be like kind of a side of a deer antler. I'm not too sure. And then William Assens again, another clan signature. I think I only found 2 from him. And then those ones from Menado Minis that had traveled. So there's other lists that I have that I'll show next week. I mean, those ones that had left and had stayed up there, and their descendants are still living there in Chigin and Kong and in South Bay and so forth. So Old Ann Watton, Samuel Kitchi Cake, Cupcog family, Habents, Shokon too as well. Some of the notables. But I thought it was an awesome document. It's the only document that I've seen with the majority of clan signatures from Chimnasing. And I apologize for not sharing a lot with the other First Nations too as well, because the same thing. There's a lot of I mean, a lot of these things, they just signed an X where sometimes maybe it was just the chief who signed on their behalf or so forth, right? Or it was just some of those shady workers just signing, just making paper, just signing X's. I don't know. Here's another document from that council in 1840 showing all our different chiefs. And from the earlier documentation where we've seen the list of clans from the Mishomis book, I mean, of the Crane clan and the Loon clan being those chieftain clans, and Turtle clan being the intermediary and so forth. A lot of this time period when councils were held and the places they're held, that it was those chiefs that had nominated somebody to be the chief speaker, so to speak. And so usually it was where they had the council. So sometimes it wasn't, but sometimes it was. Just out of that respect to the territory and that clan family too as well. So we have different signatures from many different areas, from the River Credit, Alderville, Rice Lake, Mud Lake, Balsam Lake, the Narrows, Snake Island, Cold Waters, Saugeen, St. Clair, Muncie Town, and as well as some Muncie chiefs. One other family I failed to mention within that list was the McHugh family. McHugh family in terms of those ones that are descended from Moses and others. I found out a couple of years back that when I was in council with Chief Mary McHugh, that family had went by Nigig Dodem. I hadn't found too much information on the early McHughs from Mud Lake and moving westward to Georgina and then up to Chinnasing and other places all in between. But I did notice that William McHugh or James McHugh on this document had signed with what looks like Reindeer Clan right down here under the Mud Lake faction with Squire Martin right above him. So whether they went by Reindeer Clan or not, there's still more work that needs to be done. But I know now that the McHugh family does go by Nigig Dodem. So that's it for now. Miigwech, I went a little bit overboard and about 15 minutes. But I yak a lot, eh? We have a lot still hanging around. Not too bored. So I'll take some questions for those that might have some questions or comments or anything else. If you'd like to talk, I'm sure my host here, Karen Mealing from the Culture Alliance, will be able to put you on speaker if that's what you wish.
Did you want to go through the Q&A box first? Because
Yeah,
I do have two people with their hands up first.
The slide, this presentation is being recorded. Did we record it, Karen? We didn't record it, did we?
No, it's recording.
Oh, it's okay. So it is going to be posted on the Culture Alliance website once we're done the series. So I apologize about going a little fast there, Isadora. Yeah, we can, Shelley, we can invite come on, Andrew Big Canoe. That would be great. I know he's got a lot to talk about. I've talked to him in the past, and I often hope to be able to see the Big Canoe papers, as he calls it, just to kind of find a little bit more. I know he's got different stories from the McGregor faction and so forth that we've talked in the past when I've seen him at different meetings. So that was yeah. I would like his insight and any other insight anybody else has. Emerson, who made him chief? I think that he was lifted. He was lifted up as chief after the fact, after John Jones had left. He was listed as like second in command with John Jones in the list of that were going to Big Bay or Nawash. And then he didn't go, so he kind of led the rest of those ones that stayed, and as well as when they stayed at Coldwater and Severn River and Potato Island and in the area, you had John Jr. with them, James. You had Thomas Assens too as well. A lot of John Aston Sr.'s relatives didn't follow him to Bosley Island, so they lifted him up to be chief at that time period. So it's I've never found any documentation in terms of who made him chief. I just seen him as that marker or as that mark. in terms of his totem. That's what I mean by clan mark, in terms of his mark on the paper. What else? Scott Simpson, what would you suggest someone to do looking for their clan if their mother's side is Toby and father is unknown, most likely Jognosh? Start with that same, Scott. Start with that same, visit traditional elder and look for guidance. Offer that same in the fire outside. Ask for that guidance too as well, of where to pursue it. Sometimes, like I said before, there was some that were adopted into other clans. When we had the Migize portion of the clan gathering at Springwater Park a couple years back, there was some that were adopted into other clans too as well, which was pretty good. So yeah, that's a good start. And then seek out those ones within the community that you feel most comfortable with. Sometimes this is a hairy situation with some. Do you mean if you go to someone you don't know, so to speak, sometimes they'll tell you what you want to hear. You know, I mean, not saying it happens every time, but you never know. You want to trust the ones you're working with too as well, and have that good relationship, right? At the clan gathering, that was the first time I've ever seen anybody adopted. You know, I mean, some of those ones who are, you know, I mean, misplaced, like myself, and those ones taken through the 60 scoop, or those ones that that are taken, you know, I mean, when parents aren't doing so well, and then cousins or aunties or uncles or other members of the band take them in, you know, I mean, then they're adopted into that clan too as well. But in terms of the Toby family, we'll talk about that portion when we get to Potawatomis too as well. I've got a lot of good information. Probably not as much as my buddy Bernard Nicholson from over there in Honey Harbor, but I'll do my best to share what I can. Is there any other questions?
I see that Emerson still has his hand up. I'm not sure if you've answered his questions, but I will allow him to talk. All he can do is unmute himself if he wants.
Okay. Do I have to do that?
No, he's unmuted now. Yeah, but his hand is up. Emerson, do you have a question?
Are you there, Emerson?
He may have just forgotten to put his hand down.
Okay. All right. So next week we're going to, well, thank you very much for all the comments. I hopefully you enjoyed tonight's session. Next week we'll carry on with some of our Gigon Doodemag, as well as the great large Adik Dodem, you know, as the reindeer clan and white-tailed deer clan and so forth, and hopefully carry on within some others too as well. There'll be a big discussion, and then we'll carry on into some bird clan and tree clans and so forth. So I just want to say miigwech for everybody tuning in tonight. We do have, don't go anywhere yet, because we have a giveaway. I'm just gonna share the screen here real quick. So I was hoping to get them out, but the giveaway is two frame prints of mine, and the winner can pick any print from my website under the paintings portion, and they'll get an 11 by 14 inch print or frame print. So for those ones that win, please send us, well, we've got your contact information, and we'll send it out, and then I'll be able to mail it out to you as well. So it's a free for all, and that's not gonna show, you know, this is it kind of thing. I'm giving you guys the choice. So let me share the magic wheel here. If I can get it. Hold on a sec. All right, so there's going to be two. Everybody see that? Good to go? All right, we're spinning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you've got to be here right now to be able to get it. If you're not here, then you're out of luck. Who is the lucky winner? Ben Cousineau. All right, Benny. Is Benny still here? Is he in the list?
Doesn't look like he is.
Did he take off?
He may have, yes.
Okay. Ben, are you there? If so, say something in the chat. We'll give him a count of 3, 2, 1. We'll try it again. Troy Meneg, is Troy Meneg there?
Can you say Troy?
Yeah, Troy.
Nope.
No? Uh-oh, hopefully we won't be here too long. Kayla Sutherland? No?
Kayla Sutherland, is that what you said?
Yeah, Kayla Sutherland.
Nope, she's not here either.
We're losing. Let's try again. Let's try again. I just have fun playing this wheel. I don't play a lot of, I don't gamble lots, but I miss the slots every now and then. Hila Crushell. Hopefully I spelled that right. No.
I think she was with us earlier, but she's gone now.
All right. Took a long time to put in these names. I know that. Brittany Meneg. Brittany, you there? Is Brittany there?
She's still showing up. Yes, she's there.
All right, Brittany, one of the winners. All right. Okay, we'll do one more. Naomi Recollet. Is Naomi there? Are you there, Naomi? No dice, Naomi?
No, I don't see her. Sorry.
Okay, it's all good. I kind of want to go too. Yvonne Corbiere. Yvonne, are you there? All right.
Yes.
Big wedge, Yvonne. Congratulations, congratulations. So I just want to say Chimi Gwitch for everybody participating tonight. If you have any other questions or concerns or would like to share anything else, please feel free to give me a call. My phone number is 705-500-3480, or you can reach me at my email, claytonsamuelking@gmail.com. I'm open to conversation and sharing some of this knowledge and learning from others too as well. So until next Tuesday at 7 p.m., I wish you guys a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay healthy. Continue doing what we've been doing for 11 months. And for those that were out shoveling hard this morning, I wish you a good night's rest. Miigwech.